They told you your 20s are for freedom, for self-discovery, for finding yourself. But they forgot to mention that freedom without direction is just another name for drifting. They forgot to say that when you're given unlimited options with no guiding framework, you're more likely to freeze than flourish. That the illusion of choice is often a disguise for chaos, and that behind many finding myself stories is a quiet panic, a sense of being lost, unanchored, and afraid to admit it. The truth is, your 20s aren't about choosing who you want to be. They're about constructing the internal system that will choose for you when life becomes loud, uncertain, and full of noise. You won't rise to your ambitions. You'll fall to the structure of your identity. And the real tragedy? Most people don't even know what that structure is made of. Jeffrey Arnett called it the age of emerging adulthood, a space between adolescence and stability where society no longer offers rituals, transitions, or clear direction. You're expected to build a life before you even understand the materials. No guidebook, no blueprint, just a vague pressure to make it before 30. But here's the problem. You've been taught to ask the wrong questions. What job do I want? What city should I live in? What's my passion? These questions are seductive because they feel actionable. But they're rooted in external markers, jobs, titles, environments. They don't build anything internal. The questions that matter are quieter. What kind of uncertainty can I tolerate? What do I do when no one's watching? How do I respond to boredom, to rejection, to failure? You think you're choosing your goals, but more often, your environment is choosing your behavior. You scroll because it's easy. You procrastinate because dopamine wins in the absence of friction. You stay in places that feel familiar, not because they're right, but because your nervous system prefers repetition to uncertainty. Stanford's Behavior Design Lab proved this. Behavior is not driven by motivation, but by environment design. Make good behaviors easy and bad ones hard. That's not discipline. That's architecture. So if you want to build a life that matters, don't start with goals. Start with systems. Ask, what system makes it easier for my better self to show up? That might mean surrounding yourself with friends who don't tolerate excuses. It might mean deleting the apps that trap your time in false rewards. It might mean scheduling 30 minutes each Sunday for what Harvard psychologists call anticipatory regret reflection, mentally imagining the cost of inaction if nothing changes. And if you think this is just about habits or productivity, you're missing the point. This is about power, because power doesn't come from charisma or talent. It comes from alignment. When your actions reflect your beliefs and your beliefs reflect your identity, not who you say you are, but what you do repeatedly when it's hard, you become dangerous in the best way possible. Not because you always know what to do, but because you've built an internal compass that still points north in the fog. And that compass doesn't arrive by accident. It's forged through friction, through contradictions, through watching yourself make the wrong choice and sitting with the weight of it, not numbing it, not rationalizing it, but studying it like a scientist. Why did I do that? What fear was I serving? What story did I obey? Because underneath every repeated mistake is not a lack of intelligence. It's a narrative, one you absorbed long before you were old enough to question it. Maybe it told you that rest is laziness. Maybe it said that love must be earned, or that you'll never be enough until you achieve more. These stories don't shout. They whisper in your choices, in your delays, in the way you talk to yourself when things go wrong. This is where your 20s become the battlefield. Not the external world, but the internal operating system that decides how you interpret that world. Two people can face the same failure. One says, I'm not cut out for this. The other says, that was a rep. I just got stronger. Same data, different filter. The difference isn't willpower, it's framework. One operates on a fixed mindset, the other on adaptive identity formation. What psychologists call self-authorship, the ability to shape the meaning of your own experiences instead of inheriting the worldviews handed to you. And you do that by writing your philosophy, not just reading others. You take notes on your pain. You use friction as feedback. You stop asking, is this the right path? And start asking, is this path making me into the kind of person I respect? Because the point isn't to avoid confusion. It's to walk through it with structure. Structure that's flexible, but grounded. Anchored in clarity, not control. And clarity, by the way, is not certainty. It's the ability to move with intention despite uncertainty. It's knowing the direction your life needs to lean, even if you don't see the destination yet. That's what makes some people magnetic. They're not frantic. They don't chase every shiny thing because they've decided what matters. And more importantly, what doesn't. They don't scroll every night hoping for answers because they've already chosen their questions. They don't envy everyone's highlight reel because they understand this. Every path comes with a cost, and your 20s are when you decide which discomforts you're willing to pay for. Do you want the discomfort of building something no one believes in yet? Or the discomfort of abandoning yourself to fit in? Do you want the ache of consistent training or the ache of wondering why you never started? One way or another, you'll suffer. The question is, will your suffering be strategic? We've been sold a myth that clarity comes from exploration, from collecting experiences like trophies. But research from Columbia's Choice Overload studies tells a different story. Too many options lead not to freedom, but to paralysis and regret. The happiest people aren't the ones who keep doors open the longest. They're the ones who close most of them, fast and go deep instead of wide. That's not impulsiveness, that's commitment. And commitment doesn't trap you, it liberates you. It gives you parameters. It lets you say no without guilt, because your yes already has a destination. But here's where most people in their 20s get stuck. They want guarantees. They don't want to invest in anything. An idea, a project, a relationship, unless they know it will succeed. So they wait, and wait, and wait, until time silently picks for them. But life doesn't reward hesitation. It rewards momentum. And momentum doesn't come from waiting until you feel ready. It comes from acting your way into readiness. Psychologists call this the confidence-competence loop. You don't get confident before you act. You act messily and inconsistently. And through repetition, you build skill. And from skill comes belief, not the other way around. So if you want to feel grounded in your 20s, don't ask for more time. Ask for more traction. Take one small bet and go all in. Not because it's the one, but because depth creates data. And only with data can you refine your path. And if you still feel lost, good. That means you're awake. It means you've exited the autopilot script that so many others follow without question. The script that says, get the degree, chase the title, measure your worth by LinkedIn updates and apartment square footage. But you're not looking for validation. You're looking for meaning. And that search, though lonely, is noble. But even that search must be structured. Meaning isn't something you stumble into, it's something you assign. Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychiatrist who survived the Holocaust, said that those who survived weren't the strongest or the smartest, but those who found meaning in their suffering. That doesn't mean they enjoyed it, it means they framed it. They told themselves a story that gave their pain purpose, and that story changed their chemistry. Your 20s are when you begin building that ability to interpret your experience through a lens of authorship, not accident. It's not about what happens to you, it's about what you decide it means. That's your true power. Not to control your environment, but to choose your interpretation. But that power must be trained through reflection, through solitude, through what MIT's Sherry Turkle calls productive boredom, moments when the brain is unstimulated and forced to confront its own architecture. That's when the mind begins to reorganize, to self-calibrate, to synthesize experience into belief. And belief is what builds resilience. Not the kind that shouts affirmations in the mirror, but the quiet kind. The kind that helps you get up after the 10th rejection and try again. Not because someone said you could, but because you've decided who you are. And that decision, once made, becomes immovable. This is the hidden curriculum of your 20s. Not just surviving, not just achieving, but shaping the lens through which you'll interpret the rest of your life. Because make no mistake, how you train your mind in your 20s will echo through every decade that follows. Not just in what you do, but in how you see. A person who believes failure is feedback will try again. A person who believes failure is identity will quietly disappear from their own potential. Same event, different meaning. That's the power of inner architecture. So how do you build it? Not with vague affirmations, not with empty motivation, but with design, with systems rooted in research and tested by reality. Use frameworks that have been proven, like the Stanford Tiny Habits method, not because you need to hack your brain, but because repetition with ease beats ambition with friction every time. Adopt what behavioral economists call pre-commitment strategies. Make decisions today that make tomorrow's choices automatic. Set your default path so that doing the right thing is easier than doing the convenient thing. That's not restriction. That's freedom through constraint. And build what Harvard calls psychological capital. Not just optimism, but hope grounded in planning, efficacy built on progress, resilience forged through controlled exposure to failure. You don't develop this by avoiding difficulty. You develop it by engineering your environment to help you endure it. That's the paradox. Sustainable growth isn't about pushing harder. It's about designing smarter. And design includes relationships. Surround yourself not with people who validate your excuses, but with those who challenge your architecture, who reflect back your standards when you forget them, who ask better questions instead of offering shallow reassurance. Because the people around you are not neutral. They're architects too. Either they're reinforcing your inner structure or eroding it. So choose carefully, because in your 20s, proximity is destiny. You become what you're repeatedly exposed to. Ideas, attitudes, language, behaviors, they all seep in. You don't notice the shift until you look back and realize you're living someone else's script. And that's the real danger. Not that you fail, but that you succeed at something that doesn't matter. That you build a life so well polished on the outside, yet hollow at its core, because you never pause long enough to ask, who is this for? What part of me is this achievement feeding? Am I chasing this because it's right or because it's visible? In your 20s, visibility is seductive. You want proof that you're on the right path, so you start signaling. Degrees, titles, followers. You build a resume that looks like momentum, even if your soul is still stationary. But a life built on external signals is a life dependent on applause. And applause is seasonal. It's noisy in the beginning, but it fades. Then you're left with silence. And the question, do I like who I've become when no one's watching? That's why identity must precede strategy. Your 20s are not about perfecting a plan. They're about crystallizing a point of view. What do you believe about effort, about love, about time, about meaning? Because your beliefs will make decisions long after your motivation runs out. And don't be fooled. Identity is not found. It's built through constraints, through discomfort, through choosing principles and living them in moments when breaking them would be easier. Integrity isn't about morality, it's about coherence. When your actions and your words and your values form a single shape, that shape is what people feel. That's what makes you trustworthy, even to yourself. So forget becoming impressive. Become consistent. Impressiveness fades. Consistency compounds. And that's the final irony. You don't need to figure it all out in your 20s. You just need to build the kind of mind that can navigate what comes next. A mind with structure, with story, with a bias for reflection, not reaction. That's what matters. That's what endures. Because at the end of it all, you won't remember every choice you made in your 20s, but you will remember the shape of the person you became. Not the details, but the direction. Not the results, but the resolve. The 20s are not the season to finalize your life. They are the season to fortify your foundation, to build the scaffolding of a mind that can withstand pressure without collapse, a spirit that bends but doesn't break, a compass that holds true even when the map is blank. So stop asking, am I behind? You are not behind. You are building, quietly, intentionally, against the noise, against the algorithms, against the myths that say this decade is for performance. It's not. It's for preparation, for learning how to lose without losing yourself, for sitting with uncertainty until it becomes clarity, for walking through confusion with enough structure to not get lost inside it, for choosing your pain, your people, and your principles on purpose. Because when the noise fades and the rush slows down and the world stops trying to tell you who to be, all that will be left is the mind you've built, the beliefs you've chosen, and the path you've paved in silence. And that will be enough. That is what actually matters in your 20s. That is what actually matters in your 20s. Not being certain, but being conscious. Not moving fast, but moving aligned. Not avoiding mistakes, but integrating them. Because it's not the absence of failure that defines you. It's what you do with the data of your experience. How you use it to refine the story you tell about yourself and the world. You are not here to become someone else's definition of success. You are here to become self-authored, to build a life that is psychologically congruent, intellectually honest, emotionally resilient. That kind of life cannot be handed to you. It must be built, one intentional choice at a time. And yes, it will be hard, because anything that matters will ask something from you. It will ask you to give up certainty for growth, comfort for character, approval for authenticity. But in return, it gives you something rare. A life you actually recognize when you look in the mirror. A life you would choose again, not because it was easy, but because it was yours. So take this decade seriously, but not solemnly. Build, but don't rush. Reflect, but don't spiral. Commit, but stay adaptable. And above all, remember, you are not falling behind. You are laying brick. You are architecting the invisible. And one day, without realizing it, you'll look back and realize this was the decade that made everything else possible. This was the decade that built you.